Hello, everyone. I think we're getting Naveen pulled up on stage.
Oh, we
There he
missed the
is.
video. Where'd the video
Where
go?
is our video?
I don't know.
Remo team, can we get our video?
Here, let's get off stage. All right. Well, Nikhil, you want to come on stage as well?
There we go.
I was saying, we that video is so great. We had to show the video, with that awesome music. So couldn't leave without that, right?
Absolutely.
So, welcome everybody to our third session on creating equity. My name is Naveen Bunsell with Small Biz Cares, executive director. I also have Taylor Slovak, our director of membership and programs, who's going to be. I'm going to hand it off to her here in a second. But wanted to welcome you all. Definitely super happy to have you with us today. Want to give you a brief overview of Small Biz Cares for those that maybe don't know what we do. Small Biz Cares is a nonprofit organization that was started in 2018 with the goal of connecting, mobilizing, and inspiring small businesses to make a lasting impact on our community. And we do that through a number of programs, volunteering events, fundraising events. We have a scholarship fund where we support education. And we have other experiences, virtual events, in-person events to really kind of build a community, showcase nonprofits, hence Nonprofit Appreciation Week, and really raise money and awareness for great causes and great businesses doing good. And so Nonprofit Appreciation Week was born last year. So this is our second year. And, again, the goal here is to really shine a light on some great organizations that are doing good in our community, to provide information and content that helps educate folks on what's going on in our community, what things that are happening, and how to get involved. And so definitely appreciate everybody on here who's taking their time out to be able to check out these organizations and what they have to offer. For those of you that aren't able to make it live, you'll also see it recorded. We're going to be publishing those recordings on our website and sharing those after the event. So definitely stay tuned for that. And I think that's all I have. With that, I'm going to hand over to Taylor Slovak, who's going to take over from here. I'm going to sign off, and then Taylor will be moderating along with Melissa from the Better Business Bureau. All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Naveen. Hello, everyone. As Naveen mentioned, I am Director of Memberships and Programs over here with Small Biz Cares. And I am so excited about today's panel. I want to take a quick moment to go ahead and thank our sponsors for Nonprofit Appreciation Week. And for this panel, we are blessed with the presence of our presenting partner, Melissa, with the Better Business Bureau of Central Ohio. They've been a longtime partner of ours, and so we're super excited to have her moderating with us today. I want to recognize our lead sponsors, Outreach Promotional Solutions, Ahola HR Solutions, the CYP Club, and our community sponsors, Borja Virtual, who they are the magicians behind this amazing platform, Remo, and are making all of the magic happen behind the scenes. So thank you so much for offering Remo for our platform this week. I want to thank the Columbus Foundation, HW & Co., and Giraffe as well for being community sponsors for our events. We have so much going on with Nonprofit Appreciation Week. Supporting our nonprofits is really the core heart of what it is that we do in terms of our mission and the impact that we work to help small business community create. And so we have had our panels all week long. We have one more panel tomorrow. And then we also have our Stomp Out Hunger virtual walkathon benefiting Fund a Fridge, which is an amazing project bringing, as a sustainable project, bringing community refrigerators to Columbus We are one of the few major cities that do not have a community fridge program. So if you haven't checked out our walkathon, please do so. We are only $500 away from our goal of raising $2,500, which will fully fund a fridge site and allow food scarce neighborhoods to have access to food that is nutritious and healthy whenever they need it, without stigma, without paperwork, 24/7. And then we also have our giving page. Our giving page, we wanted to make it easy for all of you to learn about the nonprofits that we work with, not just our nonprofits on our panels this week, but all of our nonprofit partners. So you can learn more. If you want to donate directly to your favorite cause, they're on our webpage as well. I'll be sure to drop that in the chat in just a bit. We'll go ahead and introduce Melissa. I'll let you share, a little bit about yourself, about the BBB, and really, I'd love it if you'd highlight how you all support nonprofits, because I don't know that everybody really knows about that, and I think it's a really cool thing that you guys do.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Taylor. Hello, everybody. My name is Melissa Rogner. I'm the VP of Marketing and Communications for the BBB. I'm new with the group, but very familiar with all of the good that the BBB has done in the community. So over the past 100 years, it's really been a community-based resource to build trust within businesses and nonprofits. There is a kind of a cadence of trust factors that businesses go through, but we work with nonprofits just the same, ordering or offering those tools and resources just to allow organizations to attract employees, to attract advocates, customers, and to really feel like that they can trust those organizations based on the credentials that we've laid out for to help provide resources and tools to make organizations better themselves. So nonprofits specifically are evaluated on 20 standards of accountability. And we work with each of them individually, taking them through those 20 steps to help them learn about their organization, to help them really advance their organization in ways maybe they didn't know that they could themselves. But we provide all of those resources and tools free to them to, again, help them build credibility to get more advocates for them in the community. So it's really just us connecting the dots to help consumers and patrons identify trustworthy organizations. But nonprofits are certainly, a highlight and a topic, especially as we get into the holiday season, right? And we talk about giving, and we really want to arm those nonprofits with the right resources and tools. So we are so proud to sponsor this event specifically, but to partner with Small Biz Cares, just really trying to make the community a better place. So thanks for having us.
And thanks for being a continued supporter and partner with our organization. I am about to introduce our panelists. I'm so excited about today's topic and about our nonprofits, but I want to mention, so if you look in your chat, guys, if there's a section that says Q&A, we really want this to be an opportunity to engage and connect with your nonprofits here. So if you have any questions, please drop them in there, not in the chat, but specifically Q&A so I don't lose them. And we'll make sure that we get to those throughout the panel. So without further ado, I'd love to bring up our panel today. We're joined today by Miss Avery Frost with the Columbus Urban League, Aaron Upchurch with Kaleidoscope, Sabrina Horton with the YWCA, and Denzel Porteous with the Stonewall Columbus and also the Pride Fund One. So welcome, guys. Hello. Yay, everyone is here. So I want to take a moment to go ahead and just let everyone introduce yourself, your organization, and really kind of share a little bit about how you are impacting our community and working towards DEI initiatives and making sure that Columbus and the surrounding region is inclusive and equitable as possible. And I want this to kind of be a casual roundtable conversation. So in order to not put anyone on the spot, I'll just leave it open and feel free to jump in whenever you're ready.
Cool, I'll start. My name is Avery Frost. I'm program manager at the Columbus Urban League, and I'm running a program called the Minority Small Business Resiliency Initiative. The work we do really is about supporting small minority-owned businesses, most of whom are Black or Brown-owned, so Hispanic, Latino, Asian, Indian, any sort of diverse business owner, we're here to help. We offer free business services, coaching, and a lot of our bread and butter when we're talking about equity is increasing access to affordable, relevant products that you can use to finance your business, so you can actually grow in a sustainable way, when we know that access to capital has been a long-term challenge for diverse businesses. And so that's just part of the work that we do here at the Urban League.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Erin Upchurch. My pronouns are she, her. I'm Executive Director of Kaleidoscope Youth Center, and we are Ohio's largest and longest standing organization to serve LGBTQIA plus youth and young adults. And just to explain, put the acronym out there, it's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and asexual. And we work with young people ages 12 to 24. In terms of equity, we really look at it from a top down, bottom up perspective. If we do from the, our org chart, we've got our board at the bottom, and our young people and community at the top. And so, from a place of equity with our board though, and our staff, as we work really hard to not only have diversity that's visible in terms of race and ethnicity, but also, been really working hard since I started in 2018 to have equity pay increases. And so that means it might be outside of the standard, merit or 3% or 5%, but really working to our budget to get folks up to industry standards, if not above. And then even in terms of, professional development opportunities, titles, those types of things. And then of course, for our young people, being able to be culturally responsive to what their needs are and being able to adjust and expand our programming as needed to meet those equity needs.
Good afternoon. My name is Sabrina Horton. I serve as the Chief Advancement and Engagement Officer with YWCA Columbus. So the hat that I sort of wear here at YWCA Columbus is a little bit different from my peers on the panel. I'm sort of charged with raising the funds and overseeing some of our DEI events and raising the funds for our DEI trainings, amongst the other programs that YWCA Columbus has. As you know, as most know, YWCA Columbus was founded in 1886. So we've been serving the Central Ohio community for over 130 years with the mission of eliminating racism and empowering women and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. Within that mission, some of the events, of course, of summer of 2020 led to our board as well as our CEO sort of saying now is the time. The YWCA had really tried to focus on that portion of our mission several times, several failed attempts, but last year was the time that said now is the time for us to step into the peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all portion of our mission. And so we, the board allocated resources to activate a leadership and social justice department. And there has been so much progress on our DEI work and our DEI trainings and things that we are able to offer. I know many people saw that AEP Foundation has sort of stepped to the table with us and launched the Center for Racial Equity, the AEP Foundation Center for Racial Equity here at YWCA Columbus. And we are truly proud of that work because part of doing this work is investing not just people resources, but monetary resources. So I'm really proud to be a part of this conversation today. So thank you to Small Biz Cares and the BBB.
Good afternoon, everyone. Denzel Porteous, he, they pronouns. Glad to be here with all of you. Some who I've seen in person, others who I have not seen in person before. I have the pleasure of serving as Executive Director of Stonewall Columbus. I've been in that role for just about a year and a half, depending on how you look at it, who you ask. And I've also had the opportunity to serve as CEO of Pride Fund One, which is a venture capital vehicle focused on LGBTQ identities. In particular, with Stonewall Columbus, we are in our 40th year, and like any good 40-year-old, we are rethinking who we are and how we exist in our world, in our space. And we are stepping firmly into who we knew we always should have been from the beginning. And so as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion work, I think when you're looking at an LGBTQ centered organization, our communities are so diverse and so intersectional. And I think we are spending more time talking about and uplifting the diversity within our community versus sort of singularly uplifting what we have always seen as a cis sort of white male population. We want to make sure that those in our community who need the support and resources are being uplifted the most. So as we move forward in our next 40 years, we're really focusing on issues of equity and access in particular within our community. Equity in relation to our Black and BIPOC trans community members who are, as we see, oftentimes under-resourced and underserved within our communities. We are working to open pathways for support for those populations. And then really, as I like to say, just making space and stepping out of the way for other populations as well. Our singular responsibility as an LGBTQ serving organization is to ensure that the various identities within our population have the space and resources that they need to thrive and demonstrate who they are. So it's always a pleasure for me to be able to, send folks over to KYC because they are youth serving and make space to be able to say, let's uplift that work that they do. It's a pleasure for me to work with organizations like Equitas Health, who are serving the medical needs of the LGBTQ folks in our community, who are, again, often underserved and under-resourced. My hope is that as our organization evolves and steps into the next 40 years, that we will continue to be very thoughtful and intentional about our work, that we will hold ourselves accountable and ask the community to be a part of that process of accountability as we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion work. Something I always say, which I firmly believe, is that this really is about inclusion work. If we're creating spaces of inclusion, diversity and equity should hopefully come because it's right. We're not working in homogeneous groups anymore. We're looking at different types of people and different types of voices who are sitting at the table and ensuring that there's appropriate representation from all those spaces. So that is my hope. That is the work that we'll continue to do. And I'm excited to, again, be here with all of you in conversation this afternoon.
Thanks so much, everyone. I'm truly just like humbled to be on this panel today with everybody. And Sabrina, you mentioned kind of that realization for the board and for leadership of that the time is now. And I think we all know that injustice and discrimination has been long-standing, but we of course did see this passionate uprising of awareness and and unfortunately due to a lot of really tragic events, we know that those kinds of incidents have been happening for a long time for all of the different communities we're talking about today. And so I'm curious, how has the environment and the events over the last 2 years, how they impacted your efforts to bring more equity and inclusion into the community?
Well, for YWCA Columbus, I feel like this. When we looked at the challenges of the summer of 2020, as an organization and as individuals, we sort of became a little exhausted with the narrative that we were watching play out. I call it was sort of like the common, uncommon thing where we were losing young African-American men and women to the hands of police. And we can throw the names out there from our community and others, from George Floyd to Casey Goodson. If you go back a few years, even to 2016 with Henry Green, there were so many losses that our community was taking. And I think one of those things, stepped out there and it made our board say, now is the time. But more than just the board, I think all of us, you don't come to work at the YWCA Columbus and not really buy into the mission. And if you don't buy into the mission, you're usually not here that long. And it's interesting because we have employees that have been with the YWCA Columbus for greater than 30 years, but mine took sort of a personal turn because I was with a larger institution at the time and doing some great work, doing what I love to do. And I recall my then 13-year-old daughter coming home, and I tell the story all the time to my colleagues. She came home and she said, "Mom, can I go downtown and protest with my brother and his mom?" Now, this is a 13-year-old saying this to me. So I'm sitting here saying she's watching her own mom stand on the sidelines of history, and she's watching others activate. And so about that time, I ended up crossing paths with YWCA CEO Christy Angel, and everything aligned for me to be able to come to the YWCA and really focus on this mission and how we could increase our DEI efforts through our leadership and social justice department, and everything from offering community-based trainings to establishing a community fund to our activists and agitators annual virtual event. YWCA continues to offer platforms for community dialogue and community conversation. Personally, I am starting to unlearn everything that I've been taught and starting to learn a new way of thinking about things. And I really feel like it was someone who said that you have to give everybody the opportunity to come into the discussion at really the level where they come in, but to keep the standards set high. And I think that's what we embrace here at YWCA. We create a safe space for all of our employees to come in with their level of understanding of what inclusion is, but we set the standard high and we allow our employees to hold us accountable to the conversation. So it's just so many things have gone on, but now is the time for us to implement change. And I tell people all the time, while I'm trying to implement it for me, I have two girls who are coming behind me. And so I want them to see a different world than the one that I grew up in.
Myself, I can't begin to say how much that hits home. You know, they're seeing so much, and that of are we in that line of history, and what will they remember us doing for that? That was really poignant. Thank you. What about everybody else in terms of looking at you know, things that have gone on? How's that impacted your efforts?
So as I didn't realize I was going to get hit with this emotional moment. So just thinking about the response and listening to Sabrina talk, and I think, and sort of what brought her to the work as she transitioned from where she was. I had the opportunity. I've been in higher education. I've been in nonprofit spaces for a long time, and I feel like I've existed in these worlds where, as a Black queer person, I'm there. I've been there, but I've not always been heard. Right? When we speak up about the issues that are happening within our community, within our intersectional communities. Again, I'm a Black queer person, right? Like you see me as a man, right? But I identify as queer in that space and what that means. And my communities have been murdered, like literally intentionally murdered, right? This year on record, we've had more than 46 trans identified people murdered, right? And so when you think of the intersections of that space, stepping into that work, in this moment in history is not only personally exhausting, but professionally taxing as well. And I think, it is a conversation that needs to be elevated outside of just BIPOC identities. There are extra identities that we're thinking about that have been murdered during this time. And so that's part of the big conversation that I'm trying to ensure that we're having within the queer community, within the Columbus queer community, right? It's to remind them that our intersections go deeper, right? Like, and so that has been a difficult conversation to have sometimes, to help people, guide people to ensure that they see that that as a Black person, as a Black queer person, when I'm raising my hand and saying, what about me? I'm not saying not what about you. I'm also just saying literally, what about me? Right? Like this is a part of the conversation. And now that you have a number of Black queer folks leading queer-centered organizations, that means it's all the more important for us to step up and ensure that people are paying attention and having open and comfortable dialogue about these issues, and making space for comfort. And I agree with Sabrina. It's not bringing it down. It's ensuring that the conversation stays elevated, but that people feel comfortable stepping into that conversation where they are, and again, helping them get to where they need to be. That work is personally and professionally struggling. I'm a parent as well. And I thought, to myself a year ago, I never feel like I'm doing enough. Right. I never feel like I'm doing enough. That may be imposter syndrome or whatever the intersectional things are there that make me feel like I'm not doing enough. I'm doing a lot. But as a parent, I had to say, how do I continue to exist and know that my daughter has to inherit whatever comes behind me? How do I move forward knowing that my daughter will still have these struggles of gender, of race, of identity? And that's not something that I could sit by and allow. And then also not have, again, open conversations with the entire community about it. So it's personally a difficult thing to do, to be a Black queer person in that space right now. But it's critical. It's important. And it's as I like to say, it's a steady drumbeat that needs to continue to happen, that we can't back away from. People have gotten a little bit quiet since last summer. Let's be serious, right? That intensity, that passion that Sabrina mentioned, that Taylor talked about, that passion that we saw, that heightened level of passion has started to dissipate, and that's not something that we can have happen. And so we have to continue to beat the drums just as loudly and as steadily as we heard before. And I think that is part of the conversation, which again is really important.
Something I'm really proud about for Kaleidoscope as an organization is I started in 2018, April 2018. And since then, we've been very specifically focused on being an anti-racist, anti-oppression centered organization, leading through the lens of trauma and healing, engaged care, restorative justice, and transformative justice. So all of that is kind of like how we operate, and it's our foundation. So it feeds the way that we show up and the programs that we offer. And so what that looks like, from the board level is our board in 2019 started engaging in anti-racism. I call it professional development. I don't like the word training, but that's what it is, and really focus on like what white supremacy looks like in organizations and how that shows up and how it impacts at all levels. And I bring that up because what it allowed us to do in 2020 was be responsive in a way that didn't require a lot of explaining, or in fact, I kind of had to have my board like, all right, back down a bit. Let me, like they were ready to go, and they still are all the time. And so, as a leader, that is, first of all, working with boards can be challenging. And so knowing that we have shared values and in our vision statement, we all agree on those values was something that was really supportive. And so when 2020 came, there wasn't a whole lot. It was a non-negotiable thing to take a stance and be very clear about our position and our stance. And so one of the things that we did, for Pride and for fundraising is we directed fundraising efforts to organizations around the front lines, leading protests and doing the work. I think it was, to the bail funds and some of those other organizations, we asked for folks to send money there, not to us. We invited people to rethink Pride. What does it really mean if your Pride can't be intersectional and represent everybody, every identity in there, and amplify those voices? What does that mean? And so we led and engaged in those conversations. Something else that I love to celebrate is my team is very largely older millennials and some Generation Z. And I think that makes a big difference. I'm Generation X. And so although I've got a large vision and can be considered radical, I still was raised professionally in a very different way. And so I get to follow the steps and the voices of my team, of our young people who, again, are like, this is non-negotiable, right? And that allows us to also be unapologetic in the things we say. And so we can talk about the issues that are going, we can engage with, the city's civic leadership, and we are amplifying the voices of our youth. And that definitely gives us, and I think that's a type of privilege with a nonprofit and speaking out, because we represent our community, which is our young people, right? And so we don't do things without being youth informed, youth led, youth inspired. And so an example is, I think it was issue 2, around the, I can't even think of the name of it right now, the citizens. Denzel, you were on that committee. What is it called again? The thing.
Review board? Or
Thank you. Yes.
Review board, yeah.
Yes. And as an organization, we wanted to endorse that. It's issue-based. We can do that as a nonprofit. Our board said yes. As a team, it was unanimous. But then we had to go to our youth. And the thing is, when you represent a community, if they said no, we don't want to endorse that, as an organization, we weren't going to endorse that. And so it really helps us rethink the ways we want to step forward and utilize our platforms and amplify their voices. And gratefully, they said yes. They actually didn't think it went far enough and wanted to push. And so, being able to be responsive in those spaces is really important. And then to continue to lead with language and not being afraid to call in things, not being able to talk about not just being inclusive and equity, but also what does that look like in the day-to-day? How is the work that we're trying to do for the community? It's got to be the same internally. And so even things like making sure our team gets actual opportunities to care for themselves and rest, making sure, that we were able to keep everybody on payroll full time during the pandemic. And for me to have, a queer team with, I think at that point, there's 60% were Black and brown people. It felt very subversive to be able to do that, because we know that doesn't always exist in our communities. So when we look at equity, I would say that way. And then lastly, we found ways to participate in the different protests and some of the backdoor ways that we could support people, making sure there was water and food, because sending our youth out to protest didn't feel safe. And we also equipped them with the tools, but then also as a community and as an organization, being able to let our space be used in different ways was how we were able to be a part of the larger movement.
Avery, I'll let you talk. Guys, I am intentionally kind of taking a step back on today's panel. I don't think that this is my panel to use my voice. And so I've spoken probably a bit more on our other panels, but so if you hear silence from me, it's intentional, and it's a difficult topic to talk about. I have like nothing but goosebumps and emotions, and so just so everyone knows, and I wanted to, before I get to you, Avery, I wanted to just thank Denzel and Aaron. I kept the question, at least the about the events that's gone on over the last 2 years, high level, because you're absolutely right. The amount of violence that we've seen and the uptick in that against our LGBTQA plus communities or trans communities has been really disturbing. And I personally don't feel like there is enough of a voice. I don't feel like enough people know about it. But I'm really thankful that you guys are talking about it today, because I think it's just as important. And obviously there's so much work to do. So I will let you guys continue to talk. Thank you. And Avery, I will let you take your moment.
Thank you, Taylor, for that and for this. For us at the Urban League in 2020, our organization's been around since 1918. Social service agency, working with people in a variety of ways to talk about basic needs, housing. They're not basic, but you know what I mean, foundational kind of things like housing, jobs. Now we're really getting into the business kind of space, talking about financial empowerment, but also like wealth retention. So not just creation, but how do you keep your money, right? Especially when we're not always taught or talking about that. And so for us in 2020, it was honestly a confluence of a lot of things all at the same time, as it was for most of us, right? As both service providers and advocates, you had things going on multiple fronts. And so I'm very grateful for the board leadership, but also our executive leadership for the autonomy and trusting in us as service providers, that we kind of know best practices, and we kind of have an idea of what our folks are looking for. And so when I came in, I've only been at the Urban League since April of 2020. And I was specifically brought in to build this program to support our small business population. And for me, one of the most gratifying things was for our president, CEO, and our board to really come together. When we're talking about the beginning of COVID, coming together around the Paycheck Protection Program, for instance, when we're talking about issues and barriers that exist for entrepreneurs where they weren't able to get calls back from banks they've been clients of for 20 or 30 years. Where people who had been long-term, like Bank One clients, felt like they couldn't necessarily reach their person at Chase now. And so when we came together to pull together the heads of these banks and then make direct connections for folks to get access to these loans, that was important. But that really just kind of started it off. From there, it's trying to identify there are plenty of things and resources in Columbus that help small businesses. But when we're talking about in a pandemic that is hitting our population harder than the general population, we're talking about a business population where a majority of Black businesses don't have employees. So if you get COVID, your business shuts down. You might not have key man insurance. You might not have insurance at all. And so you're just down. And so what does that look like? How can we be supportive? But also we have social unrest plus a recession jumping off, literally all at the same time. And so for us, it's been firefighting. How do we identify where we can be the most responsive and actually help in our own way? And so they probably hate it sometimes, but I do every time I can get some money or get contributions to the work that we're doing. My immediate goal is to give it away. I pass it, as much of it, through to the business community as humanly possible, probably to the chagrin of some people in our finance department, because I'm like, hey, cut the check, let's go. So we started giving out rent grants for businesses to help keep their doors open. And then we got into an alliance with Franklin County and One Columbus, and we started the Equity Alliance, where we're trying to identify how we can get more capital to the street. Well, number one, give away some money. So we started the Equity Fund. And then we're in our second round. The county has re-upped us a few times. And right now, we just had 4,300 Black and Brown entrepreneurs submit interest forms for grant dollars in Columbus, just Franklin County, over 3 weeks. And now, so we have the fun of figuring out how we figure out who gets that money, because there's not enough dollars for the request and for the need. And so for us, it's just continuing on one front, we're beating the streets, trying to make sure that we are doing what we can to keep refilling the pot, give the money away, but then also building sustainable strategies. So we're working on doing our own financing institution where we can lend money directly to entrepreneurs that we serve, and we can reduce some of the barriers that, what's really our corporate redlining. When we're talking about equity, let's talk about it. Let's really talk about how the institutionalized and systemic policies that still exist, we can all talk really nice and flowery, especially in 2020 and 2021. But if you didn't go in and change the way that you do business, you're just going to keep doing the same kind of business, and we're still going to have the same issues. And so we're really trying to get at the nature of things. And so the line that our guidance from our president and CEO is, we need to be more transformational, less transactional. How can we do more and actually change the lives of the people that we're working with? And that's the goal.
Thanks so much. I actually did not, I know corporate redlining is very much still a problem today. When I lived in Dallas, up until this past summer, I worked for the city and worked for a city council person. And I saw every day what was happening to a lot of our minority communities trying to get those loans, and whether it's for their business, whatever it is. I did not realize that that the pandemic and everything that's gone on has really complicated, made that more difficult. So thank you for speaking to that. That was a huge learning opportunity for me. And I would love to talk to you more about that. Real quick. So Naveen asks, how can small businesses play a role in creating equity through how they run their business and how they impact the community? Great question.
That's a great question. I'll take a swing real quick. have livable wages. So I know that that's not always easy as a small business, and because you carry that closely to home, but you'll retain people longer. And then in this environment, if you have livable wages with good culture in your space, you can impact households, and people will really appreciate that.
I appreciate that, Avery. I was going to say something along the same lines, is take care of your people who are actually doing the work. I know, I can't reach every single person in the community or in the state of Ohio. But the more people I support to do that work, the more lives get impacted. And so taking care of your people, paying those livable wages, and it can be a risk at times, right? And also looking at your criteria for hiring and removing as many barriers as possible. An example I'll use is our center-based program director. The position was traditionally filled by someone with a licensed social worker. And I'm a licensed social worker, so I'm all about that. And by having those credentialing standards that really were unnecessary, being able to remove those, removed barriers, and allowed us to be more inclusive about who we were hiring and expanded our hiring pool. And so even looking at that too, just because you've always done something a certain way doesn't mean it has to continue that same way. We have unlimited and flexible PTO, and it's really made a difference between people being able to, having to choose between sick time and vacation time or mental health day. And so our culture is one that, really supports wellness and rest. That's actually the priority over everything else. And so creating that culture of, if somebody has therapy or needs to go to the doctor, it doesn't have to be done in silent or secret. Finding those kind of ways, I think, to take care of your people, especially if the funds aren't there to pay the way, I still, as much as equitable as I feel like our pay scale is, everybody's still underpaid, and self-included. And it is what it is. And I'm also extremely transparent with my team. They see our budget. They know where the grants are going. They understand the decisions that go into it. So that transparency is really necessary. And it helps people feel like they're engaged in the process. Well, not helps them. They are engaged in the process. So yeah, absolutely. Taking care of your people, being collaborative in the way that things are structured will then help them care for themselves to then do the work in the community.
I think for small businesses is critically important to know your community-based resources and stand ready to make those referrals to your employees. While you may not have all of the financial resources to be able to do everything you might want to do for your employees, just by knowing your community-based resources. I recall having a conversation one day with Christy about something. It was some big idea I had for something I wanted to do. And she said, no, we won't do that, Sabrina. She said, our friends at Columbus Urban League are already doing that. And so it forced me to have to get onto the website and look. And I said, oh, this is a program I wasn't even aware that the Urban League had. But just her in that snap moment, knowing the resources and being able to sort of direct me to that program, it was one of those things. Why duplicate a service that's already being run well by one of our community partners? Be able to make the referrals to folks who are calling in for the resources. So I think that's critically important as well for small businesses.
I won't add too much. I think everyone has said spot on things. I think what right is we understand the reality that dollars do impact decisions. And so if we are able to empower small businesses to take care of their employees in an appropriate way, then the dollars will actually impact decisions in other spaces. Elected officials will pay attention to what these small businesses are doing and are saying. Their staff, who are hopefully being taken care of well, will also be aware of how they can impact and shape community. So I think I agree with everything that everyone has said, but just that uplifting moment that businesses usually have the greatest impact on policy and change. And right or wrong, I think in this particular moment, that's something that's a privilege that these small businesses can leverage to the benefit of others.
I really was not expecting to hear taking, that internal work, the response. So, and I think that's huge. Thank you guys so much. Melissa, I'm going to go ahead and let you take on the next couple of questions.
Yeah, everyone. I've completely enjoyed this conversation. And the segue to the next question kind of goes into what everyone was just speaking about. So if we look at just even continuing to think of what our greatest challenges are and just preventing us from being inclusive, I've heard some of you discuss, resources, or maybe more tools and resources, and access and more access. But how can we all together become, or what's preventing us right now in terms of, from your perspectives and in your spaces of, just the organizations that you're working with and the groups of people that you're working with, small businesses specifically, which obviously we want to continue to be a resource for. What's preventing our city from being more inclusive?
This is going to sound really direct, but it is our collective lack of vision and boldness and courage to do something different. That's it. We are very resource rich in Columbus and in Franklin County. It's actually ridiculous how many social service organizations are available, yet we still have high rate of homelessness, poverty, and all the other social determinants of health with poor outcomes. And we continue to funnel money in the same way. We continue to create committees and tables in the same way. We bring people together, but there's this grasp of power that people don't want to let go of or stepping back. And there's lots of reasons for it. People are survivors in this industry. I get it. But we have to do something different. And so, even like for Kaleidoscope, I've walked away from money, about $75,000 once, my first year there, of funding, because it didn't align with our ethics and values of how we were doing things. And here's the thing is, nobody would have known if I had taken it how it was not aligned, but I knew. And so being able to be bold about that, when we talk about prevention, we have to actually do prevention work. In the city, we do a lot of intervention and we do a lot of band-aiding, but prevention is actually getting to the root and being radical and pulling that up. Like, if we're going to be transformational, we've got to transform the conditions that even allowed inequity and other harm to occur in our organizations, businesses, and city. And so we are actually in our own way collectively.
I love that resource rich. I agree. I completely agree.
Yeah, I just want to say cosign. That was exactly right. I appreciate, and I think at this point we have to be more direct. Because especially coming out of 2020, we're talking about the dissipation of the energy, and it's falling back on the people, the advocates and the communities that are being discriminated against. The lift, it fell back. Whereas if we're going to make any substantive changes, it has to be, first of all, there needs to be more introspection happening amongst some of the public entities and people in power and policymakers. There has to be a little bit more introspection and actively taking steps to make changes. We can't expect folks like the organizations on this panel to be doing the lion's share of the work. We need partners in the work, and honestly, for some of this, we need other people to be leading the work. There's only but some. I can provide capital, I can do business help, but if the contracts are still locked behind a door, the contracts are still locked behind a door. If we can get other people to support these retailers, these businesses, these service providers, we're only going to get but so far. There has to be more action. Like we talk about affordable housing, we talk about livable wages. We talk about the fact that you have to work 60 plus hours a week at a wage that you probably don't have access to get basic housing in the city, and there's even less of it. And there's a growing homeless challenge. But what are we really doing about it? Where are the changes in the affordable housing policies? What is affordable housing? What are we really talking about here? What are we actually doing? If we know that we need 50,000 plus affordable housing units in Columbus, that number's probably low. But what are we really doing to build them? There's a whole bunch of building happening here, but what is actually being built for the people who are going onto the street? Those are questions I have every single morning, every single day.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that goes into, how can we collectively be a part of the solution? And it sounds like, we need to continue to be advocates of policy change, right? and understand how we can really help move the dial so that those resources that we have, since we're resource rich, are being used in the right spaces. Who else has
Can I
thoughts
add-
on that?
I wanted to add something else. Clearly, this is a big issue for me.
I
But
know, I appreciate it.
yeah, yes, policy change, but I think we would be surprised at how many decisions can be made outside of policy. Policy change, doing surveys, doing committees, actually is just delaying the resolution, delaying the repair. And I think we have to. So when you talk about white supremacy and how it's just an organization and system, like this is an example of that. How what we do collectively is you just want to take another survey, another focus group, another this, another that. Meanwhile, people are still homeless, they're still hungry, schools are still failing, LGBTQ youth are still harming themselves. Like all of that is still happening as we plan. And so policy, yes, but like do the work. We can do the work. And then if you need to build policy around the new work, do that. And that's the boldness and courageousness that I want to talk about. And another, just to give a real example, is HUD funding. We have housing programs at KYC, and we don't take HUD funding because they're so restrictive on definitions of homelessness, to the extent of like, you must be literally homeless or at 2 weeks risk, 14 days. Queer folks, queer youth in particular, don't typically meet that criteria for homelessness because they couch surf. Culturally, it's just different. And we don't have mechanisms in the county to actually count those identities. So we have to go on anecdotal national information where they're 40% of the entire homeless population. We know this, and we know there's about 7,000 kids in general, or young people in general, homeless here. And so instead of like doing what we've always done, this is where we get to collectively do something different. And that's one, I say small issue, knowing that it's a huge issue, but it's something that we have the numbers. There is so much money. It's just the people willing to take what would be considered a risk, unfortunately, to build and do something different.
And I agree. It's the question to me is policy is important, but it's the process change that I think Erin is talking about that is 100%. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it because I think that's we don't need another committee. We don't. We know the problem is. We've seen the problem. People are here telling you what the problem is. So just do the right thing, right? Like let's go back to the Spike Lee movie. Just do the right thing. You understand what it is. You know what it is. I mean, I know I work in an organization where someone's like, well, let's do a committee. No, I don't need a committee. The people have told us what we've been doing wrong. We know what we've been doing wrong. So just do the right thing and change the policy. Just do the right thing and change the policy, right? Like, yes, I 100%. It is a process. It is a process. But the thing is, it's a process thing for so many things, right? Like as we think about how we perpetuate ourselves in places and spaces, right? Like the people who are leading us, quote unquote, have all gone through these same educational processes of, well, when I was in school, we did a committee and we talked about it this way, we did this, and then we don't have time for that. We literally do not have time for that. People are dying. Right. And so if you know that this process is what's delaying the policy change to happen, then jump over the process and just go to the policy. Right. I mean, we know it. Again, Erin is correct. Like that when you know that there's a problem, when someone is bleeding, what do? Right. You give them a Band-Aid, you stitch it up, you fix it right away. You don't say like even if you have to triage it for a moment and then you take it to get done, but you don't sit there for a while and wait and think about it. Right. And those who sit down and wait and think about it, what often happens when they have that injury, it becomes worse. Right. So again, we 100% know there's an injury, fix it. Don't banter it around with committees and forms and things. But yeah, 100.
I have to say, I get fired up about this. This is one of the reasons why I love working for a municipality. These issues aren't new. These issues are not new at all. And by the time, like I can't imagine where we would be as cities if instead of a study or a committee or a partnership to do a study and putting that money there, if we had actually just done something, where we would be today. And yet we consistently, it's just study after study after study. And by the time that is completed, we now have to fight for funding to actually do something about it. And all of the people that were currently being impacted at that moment, at that time, have been completely left by the wayside. So yes, speak. Thank you. what do you guys think? So how can those in the community, maybe we're not business stakeholders, we're just a person who wants to make an impact, who wants to be a part of the solution. What advice do you have? Like, if you could give a takeaway today for somebody, what can they do?
For me personally, is just take the veil off, admit to sort of the lack of knowledge, but get to the place where inclusion is the goal and take the steps to get there. That is one thing that we are doing at YWCA Columbus. We don't try to say we have all the solutions. Everybody knows, we have 3 pillars of our work that we focus on, but even within those pillars of the work, we don't try to admit that we have all the solutions. What we do attempt to do is the internal work and the external work to impact positive change in our community. So if I were to say anything, it's like, take the veil off, be prepared to have the tough conversations, be prepared to do the work and keep the momentum going. It's like, now we're out of 2020, we're not hearing the rumblings. Let's get back to the feeling that we had every time we turned on the news in 2020. And let's just roll up our sleeves together and go to work. Keep the conversations going.
I feel like I could choose like 20 things. So I'm trying to choose something that's kind of not easy, but easier. So, just first of all, remember that the ability to disengage or to forget about it is a privilege. And a lot of people do not have to think about equity or inclusion at all. So if you, from where you are, first of all, use the power that you have where you are. So that could be your time, your energy, how you spend it, how you volunteer, how you contribute to the greater good. That could be your dollar. How do you spend your money? Who do you spend your money with? I'm not saying you just need to turn around and spend it with well, yes, I am. You should spend money with Black-owned businesses, first of all. I am going to say that. But secondly, small business, local businesses, small businesses, women-owned businesses, businesses on your block, in your community, in your neighborhood, your money actually makes a difference. It's helping to pay somebody's salary, and it's making sure that they can stay there when right now, still, every business doesn't know that they're going to be open at the end of this year even, because of the things that are going on. So just like try to be tuned in, just engage, help out how you can. We're not asking everybody to do everything, right? Because we can't do everything. We're fully aware of that. But I am asking you to contribute to this whole thing or get out of the way. That is also something that I'll say. If you're not willing to help, just move out of the way. Do not provide another obstacle or a barrier, and just go do something else while we continue to do the work if you don't choose to engage.
Yeah, I think I agree with both statements, but the idea of sort of the goal being inclusion, or the direction and the ultimate path being inclusion, I think is probably the thing that stands out the most for me always. Because again, I do believe that the more we practice inclusion, everything else will start to align. The more that we make spaces for people to feel safe, to feel comfortable, to feel welcome, to know that that's what they should be, then everything else should start to align, right? When you have diversity sitting at the table and having conversations, everyone's voice, hopefully, right? If we're sitting there being inclusive, should be heard, and we'll think about those who are not getting paid the right wage, those who are not receiving the right kind of medical care and access to care, those who are not receiving the right kind of business funding. If we are all working towards inclusion, we will start to see that the disparities in our spaces, the more that we can be paying attention to that. So that would be my thought there.
There we go. Certainly, yes to everything that's been said. I think as a community, understanding when we talk about equity and inclusion, it's not necessarily fair, right? Equal, being equitable. I mean, ideally, there's this cartoon graphic, and it shows like equality, two people standing on the same box, equity, raising it up higher. But then there's liberation, and where we take away the fence or the barriers altogether. And I think if we can have a liberated mindset, then we can not worry about the impact of engaging in equity on other people, if that makes sense, because our liberation is tied up within each other. So I think having a good understanding of that, but also speak up. If you're a donor or you're buying things from places, like you get to ask where that money goes, especially if you're a donor or volunteer or stakeholder in general. And so a lot of organizations and businesses made statements last year. Where are they today? Are they still aligned with those statements? One thing I love about Christy at the Y is she puts her money where her mouth is. And she's somebody that you could call and say, hey, you said you're going to do this and it's not happening. What's up? And Christy's not afraid to have that conversation. And so we need more leaders who are willing to do that. But then also, you all heard us talk about the challenges and the barriers here in the city. And so having those same conversations, going to those, being engaged in civically around council meetings, Franklin County, the commissioners meetings, or just paying attention, basically. Because that's really, I think, where some of the changes, we can do this all the time and we can preach to the choir, but they also are still giving us money, and we've got to do all the shucking and driving that we do. And the more that the collective voice raises to, I think, make these asks and make these requests, that's how our community gets to be different and gets to function, I think, in a more effective way and more equitable way.
I appreciate all of the insight. I think when the collective voice starts to quiet down, I feel like a lot of us, at least for me, I won't speak for anyone else, there has to be a lot more, there's more work, I think, that goes into trying to continue to be a part of moving things forward. Looking back in 2020, resources and information was being shared everywhere you can possibly imagine. And as those voices get quieter, that means that people have to seek out that information. They have to seek out what's going on in the community and what their role is. And it's not hard work, right? It's not. I think, Avery, you're absolutely right. Every single thing we do, whether where I'm spending my money, where I'm going, all of these things are very easy little things that we can do that make a big difference over time if we all do them, and they help to create that inclusive space. I want to personally thank you today for the opportunity to listen and to learn. It is truly a privilege to sit at your table today, even if it's virtual. It has been really wonderful, and I appreciate all of your perspectives, insight, and knowledge. I want to thank my co-moderator, Melissa, and the BBB. Thank you today for being a part of this. And thanks to our Remo team for making sure I don't break this platform and for building a platform that I can't break. I really appreciate it, and we appreciate your contributions. I want to open the floor to anyone who's here who wants to take the opportunity to connect with these wonderful organizations and leaders. Obviously, they have a ton of insight and information to share. And we'd love for you to get plugged in, get involved, whether it's your dollars or your time. I know that resources are very much needed. So we're going to go back to the floor. When it's in conversation mode, to see who's in the building, you just hover over their icon to see who it is that's at that table. Double click on the table if you want to chat. Keep your camera and your mics on so that you can say hello. And
I just wanted to say really quickly, thank you so much to the panel.
Sorry,
so
Melissa.
insightful today. No, I know very much. Truly enjoyed the conversation.
It's definitely a really, really important one. And I hope we keep having these conversations. And I look forward to reaching out to each of you as we build our programming for 2022. I want to make sure that inclusivity is at the forefront of the initiatives that we are working on. So without further ado, I'll let you guys go back. Be sure to check out our, it's smallbizcares.org/nonprofit week 2021. We have a great panel tomorrow, and you can access our giving page there so that you can donate directly to these orgs and others. Thanks, guys.